You're listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 288.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How is everybody doing today? Hope you're all doing well. Very excited to be here. And I'm actually recording this episode a week early because when you are listening to this, if you listen in the middle of March, we will have just returned from a trip to Miami to visit one of my sisters. And I usually batch my podcast episodes, so I'm going to have this one up and ready to go. As you may or may not know, we are currently enrolling new students in our 2024 group for Cookbooks on KDP. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today in this episode, and today share with you yet another interview with a student who published a book in 2023 inside the Cookbooks on KDP program. Her name is Chantal Secours. Chantal is a culinary nutrition expert, recipe developer, and YouTuber who enjoys creating and sharing healthy plant-based recipes and allergy-friendly treats and recipes. Her gluten-free journey started in 2015, and she learned to cook and bake without top allergens. This also became important when her son developed multiple food allergies. She is the author of Gluten-Free, No Egg or Dairy Bread Machine Cookbook, which is available on Amazon, and I have linked to that below. And again, as I am proud to say, she is a graduate of the 2023 cohort on Cookbooks on KDP. Cookbooks on KDP is a 12-week group program for recipe writers, developers, and family recipe collectors who want to learn how to publish their recipes in a book on Amazon. Chantal wrote and published the book that we're going to talk about today as a result of being in the program. So if you have a collection of recipes that you want to publish in a book, the doors for our 2023 cohort are open through Friday, March the 15th. So when you complete the program, you're going to have finished 2 types of recipe books that you can share with family and friends, sell on Amazon, or give away as holiday gifts. If you'd like to learn more about this offer, please head on over to www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/KDP2024. Sort of a mouthful that's linked below in the show notes, and you can read more details. Again, the doors to enrollment close on Friday, March the 15th at 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We're switching to Daylight Savings Time. I think we actually switched this weekend when we're on our trip to see my sister. So anyway, would love to have you inside the program. Been having a lot of fun talking to people who are going to enroll in the program, who have already enrolled in the program. And you do get a bonus recipe writing training. It's a 5-day training called Recipe Week. So as soon as you enroll, you get access to Recipe Week. You can start getting your recipes in order. And we will start the program the week of March the 18th. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with Chantal Secours. Hi, Chantal. Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast.
Hi, Maggie. Thank you for having me.
Yes, so excited that you're here. Can't wait to talk about all the things about your new book. But before we get started, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
All right. Well, my name is Chantal Secours. I'm from Ottawa, Canada, and I'm the proud mom of 2 busy and amazing boys. I'm married to a wonderful, kind, and patient husband, and we also have our cat, Nori. She's super cute, curious, funny cat, and she brings our family a lot of joy.
Yes.
I completed a culinary nutrition course, and when I took it, I never thought that I would be starting like a small business afterwards, but I did. And at first, it was a huge learning curve, more so on the food side, as I kind of had to try different things to discover what I really wanted to share with the world. But at first, I thought I wanted to set up workshops like for kids to learn more about healthy eating. But like after a few years of experimenting, everything kind of fell into place. My bread recipes started gaining traction. And luckily, not so lucky for people during COVID times, but during COVID, everyone seemed to want to bake, especially sourdough bread recipes. And I, on my blog, had a lot of gluten-free sourdough bread recipes and gluten-free sourdough starter. But I also had like a lot of how-to videos. And so those really took off during that time. And also because certain ingredients like wheat flour or yeast and eggs and dairy were not always available during those years, more people were searching for unique vegan bread recipes without eggs and dairy, or with a variety of grains like sorghum, for example, which I also had on my site. It's also at that time that I monetized my food blog. Monetizing a blog means that I was getting more visitors to like see my recipes each month, and so I could add ads on my site to help me earn some money to pay for some of my blogging expenses. I think like after that, the rest is pretty much like history. I've been developing recipes, creating videos, and share my knowledge with people who eat in a similar way that I do.
Yeah.
I'm also very thankful to do so from the comfort of my own home, because if I don't feel my best one day because of autoimmune health symptoms, it's much, much easier to take time to rest.
Right.
I discovered you, Maggie, on my I discovered your podcast, Maggie, a few years ago when I signed up for your Cookbook Writers Academy, because at the time I was still trying to figure out what kind of cookbook I wanted to create. But it's really when you offered your KDP program that it gave me the right nudge to go ahead and get started with a smaller cookbook. And I did just that. I self-published one low-content book and my first 100-page cookbook. And actually taking the steps to do the work was like ultimately the best way to learn. So yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when we actually walk through the process of doing the book ourselves, how it all kind of starts to make sense.
It for sure does.
I think you coming into the cookbook project, you had this active blog. And tell everybody what it was like. What's it like to have a blog? Because there might be someone listening that perhaps this is a good way for them also to share their recipes and their knowledge with people all across the world. And what it took to actually, become someone who was committed to blogging on a regular basis.
Well, so I started blogging, I believe it was 2017, early 2017, right after I completed my culinary course. And I was still learning about a lot of things. And sure, I had a graphic design background, but writing recipes and recipe development was still pretty new to me. So I think having a blog was like the perfect platform for me to use my graphic design skills, like photography and even layout, and then also, of course, the recipes to just connect with people that ate in a similar way that I did. I'm trying to think of I how could I say this? Blogging was new to me. So
Yes.
at the same time I was learning a lot about blogging. So it's one thing to learn the whole recipe writing and taking food photos and everything else, but then blogging has come a long way, even just like in a few years. So there's a lot of newer tools to help new bloggers create recipes. But I feel like it's a great way to uh, I don't know, just collect everything that I do in a way that I can easily share. So somebody says, "Hey, do you have a grain-free recipe for bread?" Let's say. Well, then I could just send them a link. So I had a way to collect all my data, my information to easily share with people. And that just became kind of my favorite way to share information compared to having workshops or teaching. And during COVID, having in class like classes was kind of not an option.
Right.
So I just kept doing the blog thing for a few years, and I'm still doing it. yeah, and I feel like it's just a great way to collect all my information, I guess,
Yeah.
to have it all in one place. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, blogging is a great way to get all your uh, thoughts down, your recipes down, collect everything in one place. But like you said, there were certain things during COVID that really gained traction with people
Yeah.
making bread, making sourdough, and the kinds of things that you were talking about. So when you start to get that much excitement around a topic and you see that people are really focusing on a couple of things that you're blogging about, we started working together on your cookbook idea. Tell us a little bit about the book that you ultimately wrote. What's the name of the book, and when did you finish it?
So the title of my book is Gluten-Free, No Eggs or Dairy Bread Machine Cookbook. And I started, I think, like I've always been creating bread recipes, but then the idea for the smaller cookbook, I feel like it was at about this time of year, maybe last year,
Yeah.
that I really started. I switched the way I was preparing the recipes more for the bread machine, because before I was working on a bigger proposal for a different kind of baking book, but then with the smaller book, I'm like, let's just do a bread machine cookbook. And then from that point on, I started testing and developing specifically for the bread machine.
Yeah. And it does make it easier to have a narrow focus for a book with less quantity of recipes. And the reason I decided to embark on this self-publishing project in that way is I thought, well, if we could all wrap our mind around 25 to 30 different recipes, it's easier to work on something and get it published in about 3 months, rather than thinking we have to put every recipe that we've ever developed or created into a book that feels like a bigger and more overwhelming project. Because as you know, and people are soon going to find out here through what you're going to talk about, we were doing everything ourselves for the books, from the recipe writing, laying the book out, doing the photography. The whole process was our responsibility. So, why did you decide to do a bread machine book with gluten-free vegan recipes?
Well, I thought it was kind of like you said, I was just niching down even more because I had kind of played around with different ideas for baking cookbooks, but there are some on the market. So I was trying to also fill a gap and see what way I could best help people that bake gluten-free and vegan recipes. And I'm on various like baking groups, and many people were getting so frustrated with gluten-free breads in a bread machine, but more specifically, like recipes without eggs or dairy. And I was like, how can I help these poor people? So I've tested 3 bread machines, and when I started creating my recipes, I did take some from my blog and like tweak them for the bread machine, but then I also created new ones. But it took a lot of testing because different machines have different functions. And maybe I have a machine, but maybe you, Maggie, might have a different bread machine.
Right.
And after like testing so many loaves of bread, I think the biggest, uh, the main reason I want to share the bread machine cookbook is that people get frustrated if their breads don't turn out because they're trying to use the gluten-free setting on a bread machine, but you don't actually need the gluten-free setting on a bread machine because that's usually often why the recipes don't turn out, which is
I
like
didn't
really
even
strange.
know there was a gluten-free like button on a bread machine.
The newer machines pretty much all have a gluten-free setting, but not it doesn't work. So you have to keep in mind with bread recipes, there's quick breads, there's yeasted breads, but there's also sourdough breads with like wild yeast, right? So you can't just push a button and hope that it will turn out. So it took me quite a lot of testing. Like I understood what I was doing, but then I also had to get better at explaining what I was trying to teach
Yeah.
with the instructions for my recipes. So for the most part, a gluten-free bread recipe with yeast might work with the gluten-free setting. But what if that recipe does not have eggs? Then again, it's a completely different type of recipe. So all my recipes in my book were specifically created to not have gluten ingredients or eggs or dairy. So they have been created and tested just the way they look in the picture. So they are smaller loaves of bread. I don't think you can expect your loaves to look like they do in some of the photos, like rising above the bread pan. Like you will probably not see that with a gluten-free vegan bread because they would not bake properly, or it would need like over 2 hours to bake. And that's not why people tend to use bread machines. But yeah, so altogether, that was kind of why. And I still like today see so many people getting frustrated. And I even to this day now, I wish like I have even more information I could share, tips and tricks, but that I can do in videos, right? I can
That's right.
do in more blog posts, and I can like link to the book. So yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is so important with a cookbook is that you actually are kind of living what you are writing about. So it kind of inevitably happens when you're working on a set of recipes. But like you said, you ended up trying different bread machines. You learned about the settings they had. You learned that the gluten-free setting really doesn't work that well. That the dome of the bread isn't really probably going to rise above the pan, and these are only things that we learn through like living the recipes that we're actually putting in the book. And I think that's what makes us really well equipped to talk about the book and share the book when it's finished, because through working on it, you learn so much.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when you were working on it, outside of the actual recipe testing, what was it like to work with the Kindle Direct Publishing platform, which is what KDP stands for, and it's the platform that I teach how to use when we're working on these books. What kind of challenges did you run into working on the book for KDP?
Well, KDP was all new to me, so I was learning as I was doing the work. Um, and interestingly enough, when you upload a manuscript, is where you have access to more of the information. But until you have all your pages, um, how could I explain this? It's hard to get to access to all the information. So ultimately, you want to work on your pages, make sure they are close to finish, and then you can upload it to get a proof.
Yes.
If it's completed and final, it's even better. But I feel like I was like excited to have access to more of the functions, but I only got access once you actually uploaded the manuscript. So
Yeah.
I didn't focus too much on the KDP part until I was near complete.
Yeah. And that's true, I guess, with self-publishing, because you're not just like typing the recipes in Word, you're actually like designing them in Word or in some people use Canva. You happen to use Adobe InDesign to design your pages, but you really have to get most of that complete, don't you, to get the information from Amazon that you might need. So a
Yeah,
lot of the time that we spent in the class, I felt like was typing everything into and designing the pages.
that's right. That's right. I was using InDesign, and when you upload to KDP, you can upload a PDF.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that for quite a while because my testing took a lot longer
Yeah.
than I was planning, and the editing as well. I was working with somebody to edit my content too.
Yeah. I do think it's always interesting. We have a timeline in our mind, and sometimes it generally takes longer than
Hmm.
what we think it's going to take. So I think people just adjusting expectations a little bit is always helpful. And it's a great tip for me to remind everyone as we head into this. I also think that we're so anxious to see the book and to like
Yes.
get that proof copy so we can like see what it looks like, a sample of it under cover. But you're exactly right. We can't see that until we actually put the recipes on the page and get our pages ready.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
what yeah.
What was helpful too with your program is that we did a lower content book previous to the cookbook, and I think that helped me like visualize what the cover could be and what how thick the book would be based on the number of pages. So that was really helpful too.
Yeah, I thought that was a really fun, quick win for everybody to start the program off with designing and printing a low content recipe notebook that you can use or sell or give away as gifts, and to kind of see how the process works without all the recipe work inside. It's just like a little journal. And I love that part. I think it's really fun. And again, I'm glad that it helped you to kind of see, how things would go together, and um, that the lion's share of the work then that we have to do with our recipe books truly is the recipe work and typing that all into whatever design program we use.
Hmm.
So if someone is listening and they are thinking, "Gee, well, maybe I have a recipe collection I want to publish, or I have family recipes, or I'm a blogger. Maybe they're a blogger like you and they have recipes they want to publish for their audience." What tips would you give someone who is perhaps thinking about not only writing this cookbook, but publishing it themselves?
I think what helped me the most, even though I had been blogging and writing recipes, the process for this was like different. Um, as soon as I would get an idea, I would often go to my computer, type out like a rough recipe, and then print out a copy. And then as soon as I could go test it in the kitchen, that was perfect because then I could take notes right on the copy. And then I would go back to my computer and make adjustments based on the test I had just done. And because I was testing for bread recipes, it takes more than 3 tests on average for each recipe. So just doing it this way helped me to stay organized, because if I just jotted notes on a piece of paper or just told myself, "Oh, remember to write this down when I have a chance," I would probably forget.
Yeah.
Because when you're getting ready for a book, you don't have just like one recipe, you might have a dozen or way more than that. So just trying to stay organized is very, very helpful. And if you already have your recipes written down, but let's say they don't have measurements, well, then that's when it's a really great time to make those recipes and write down the actual measurements or weight for all the ingredients.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that one of the things that any cookbook writer is going to have to do is what you did, and that would be involved in preparing one recipe multiple times to get it to the stage that you want to get it to in order to publish the recipe. And what about the cost of that? People sometimes are so worried about the cost, that food cost. Were you able to use the recipes with your family or give them away? How did you deal with the quantity of food that you were preparing?
I have a lot of bread in my freezer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I eat, of course, what I make always. But yeah, I was baking multiple loaves per week, so definitely I would slice my loaves and freeze them for later.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And
And
now if
yeah,
you aren't baking now, you certainly have access to using that when you don't have time to bake.
yes.
Yeah. So what about staying productive and focused? This is not a project that happens overnight. We were able to accomplish 2 books in about 12 weeks, but how long did it actually take you to finish up that second book? And how do you stay focused on a project like this?
Um, I had wanted to like publish it sooner than I did, to be honest. I was working on it during the summer for sure a lot. And then the kids went back to school in September, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting so close. And then with all the development and the photos, the layout, the editing, it does take a lot longer than we think it might. So definitely to stay sane and healthy and not get overwhelmed, I think it's like absolutely necessary to like just walk away from the project every once in a while and go outside, go in nature. Because sometimes just walking away from the project too can like help you, I don't know, just realize if you're on the right track or if you're doing everything that you had planned or set to do. So, and it's also good for obviously your health if you just take breaks. Um, but that was really, really important for me, especially not to get too overwhelmed, because then you're like, oh, I'm so close. I want to finish. I'm going to keep working. But then you start to not feel well because we've just been working nonstop. So yeah,
Yeah.
taking breaks is important for sure.
Yeah. And you were able to do part of it when the kids were home from school, or did you take a break from it completely until they went back to school? I think that's important
Um,
for people who maybe are listening that have families and they're wondering how they could work this in.
yeah, so definitely when I'm doing stuff like when I'm doing work for my blog, like video work, I like to be alone. I like to be quiet. But then there's some stuff like photography or page layout um, that I can do with noise in the house. It doesn't bother me. When I'm baking in the kitchen, that's fine too. So there's definitely different tasks that you can do with people around you, and then other things that it's way easier to do when you are alone or in a quiet space. But I mean, when people are preparing recipes for their family, use that as inspiration or write down what you're doing if it's something that you think could work for your book too. Yeah, yeah.
Yep. So, it's funny when people think about working on this project, and the neat thing about Amazon is once you upload that final file, the PDF of the interior of the book, and you upload the cover and you hit the publish button, the book's available for anybody to order at that point. And what they do then, because it's print on demand, is they print the book when someone orders it. So, isn't it interesting that it happens once you actually get to that point? It's like just with the press of a button, the book is actually published or it goes live. I think there's probably a short approval process in there, but it doesn't really take very long, assuming that all the specifications are met, which you know that because Amazon will tell you if you can't publish it yet. But then you order the book, right? And you get to see the book and people start ordering the book. And that's the whole goal is we want to get the book in the hands of people who can use it. So what was your next step then in terms of marketing or promoting the book so that people knew that it was out there for them to buy?
And the first few things I did was on KDP, you have the ability to add, I believe it's called A plus content, which is the information that shows up when you scroll past like the information that's below the cookbook. I think that's helpful to set up because different people, whether it's in Canada or the US or in India or the UK, they can all see that. And otherwise, they wouldn't, I guess, with a KDP book, they wouldn't have access to see, the little images you see under the graphic that shows the book cover and the back cover. Sometimes with books that are published with a bigger publisher, they'll have access to like put more inside pages so you can get a sneak peek with the book of the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
But so the A plus content, you can set it up however you want. It can be information about yourself, or you can put pictures of some of the recipes inside the book. You can actually even share a recipe if you want. That is very nice because at least if a person goes to your KDP book, they can learn a little bit more and then better decide if the book is suited for them. Um, as far as other ways to market the book, with KDP, you can't just expect your book to be seen, unfortunately, because there's like millions of books on Amazon.
Yeah.
But an option that you do have right in Amazon is that you can set up some ads, and that's also very useful because if not, your book will unfortunately just get lost in the multitude of books that are available. But if you are on Facebook, if you are on Instagram or Pinterest or YouTube, those are all like wonderful platforms to either, you can create short videos to show your book, and you don't necessarily have to be a blogger. Just send a link or show photos to your friends and family. It all depends on what the book is about. And for me, myself, everything has been online for sure. I haven't showed my book in person anywhere yet.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely for me, what's working well is I like to create even more recipes for the bread machine, and then I'll link to the bread machine cookbook. Or if I'm doing a video about a bread machine recipe, I will mention the cookbook. I don't like to be too salesy. Maybe I should be a little bit more salesy, but so I tend to do things that work with me and what I do. And I do have a Facebook group too, so that's another way a person could mention their books. But definitely you need to promote your book in order to sell your book. So the more you do it, the better it will be.
Yeah. How have the ads worked for you?
The ads are kind of like a pay to play kind of
So it like pulls it up like on the if someone were to search.
Yeah. I think it's like if somebody searches like, let's say, bread machine recipes, gluten-free, it might pop up. So you can pick the words you want to target, or they can suggest them too. I'm not like an expert by all means with the ads yet, but I did try it at 3 different times. But at some point, again, I will try it again. But it's good to get it seen by people that don't know you. I think that's how it works. It works 100%. Well for that, for sure.
Right, 100%. And that's the difference between traffic that's organic, people that would just land on your book through search only, and then paying for an ad to place it so that it shows up higher if people search for it. And I think there's room for all of it. If anyone watched a football game in January called the Super Bowl, you know that people pay for ads all the time, and big brands pay for ads, and people like us who have online businesses, buying ads in different places can certainly serve a great purpose. So I'm glad that you added that to your wheelhouse, or you can do both. And then of course, social media, Facebook groups, Instagram, Pinterest, your YouTube, linking to it, all important. How does it feel to be getting sales?
It's been interesting for sure. So it hasn't been quite 3 months. Do you want to know how many books I've sold so far?
Sure, if you're interested in sharing that. I think
and I really truly have not been promoting it all that much, just kind of like here and there as I'm able to do so. But I've sold 160 copies.
Right.
So it's not horrible, just considering. And that is a combination of ebooks that we can also talk about after tube, and printed books. And I've sold in the US, Canada, India, Japan, UK, Australia. So it's
it's a global audience.
It's a global audience, and it averages 160 copies. And we can also talk about price points too, like how you the price that you sell your book for, it truly only like earns you a few dollars per book in the end.
Right. So let's explain
the royalty.
Let's explain how that works, because self-publishing is a way that you can retain more of the profit off the book for yourself. But let's talk about how that works in the Amazon platform so people understand.
So let's
want to walk people through the process, and I can help if you get stuck. But go ahead, because you get to decide how much you charge for your book and everything.
So earlier I was talking about how when you upload the manuscript, then you get access to see all the prices and what you can set your book price to be. But until you upload your manuscript, you cannot see those options. And that's kind of what I was referring to. I was really, really looking forward to see how much I could sell the book for. But once I got to that point, I had a price in mind, but then I'm like, oh my gosh, I had to sell the book for more in order to make a few dollars per book. So what that means is once you sell your book for, let's say, $15, then you might only earn $1 per book. Those are your royalties. Contrary to a published book by a bigger publisher, they might pay you a signing bonus of, let's say, a few $1,000s. And after that, if your book sells, you might earn a little bit per copy. But so that's kind of where the difference is. Like, you will earn per book from now until forever, until your book is up. Like, your book is going to be live on Amazon, and you're going to be earning throughout the next few years, or for as long as your book is on Amazon. But a person that gets a publishing contract might only get their signing bonus, however it's called, if their book stops selling at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
So we get to decide the price. And what price point did you pick for your book?
So I picked $18.95, I think, in the US. And I forget what that gave me, but it was around the $2 mark. So I
Right.
had to go quite higher than I was expecting
Yeah.
to be able to make a few dollars per book.
Yeah.
So maybe
Because
I should lower it, but I was like, but I've worked so hard,
I know.
right?
Right.
And then it's even more because of the difference in money to earn a few dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because Amazon will, Chantal sets the price and then they automatically subtract from you don't get $18.95 per book. They take
No,
off the
no.
cost to print the book.
Mhm.
And that could be anywhere from, based on what I saw last year, I saw $5 price points. I saw up to $10 maybe. When you're publishing books with color photography, four color printing is what it's called. It ends up being
Mhm.
higher than just a black and white book, higher print cost. Okay, then you take, so if it's, let's just say $18.95 is $10 to print it, that means there's $8.95 left, and you get 60% of that, and Amazon gets 40%. So that's where they're covering the printing's paid for, but then they also get a little bit of profit off the book. And that's of the net cost. In traditional publishing, I think that means the author gets 60% net on Amazon. In traditional publishing, you maybe get 15, although some
Mhm.
newer publishing models are coming out that are traditional publishing where they're trying to get the author a higher amount of royalty of the net price. So let's all keep our eyes and ears open for that. Um, but yeah, you're right. It then ends up being, well, a couple dollars a book. I mean, if you sold 160 books, you're getting then that couple of dollars for every book that you sell. Plus, isn't it neat to think that your book's out there in the hands of people you don't even know? I guess your blog
Yeah.
was too, but it's neat when you think of it as being a book.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right with the price. I remembered it as you were saying it. To print my book in the US, it's $9
Yes,
because of my color pages and the glossy cover.
right.
So yeah, so let's say if I did sell it for 19, you're already subtracting $9 from that total, and then
Right.
the rest is divided between Amazon and myself.
Right. And you mentioned ebooks. You have to do a separate format for the ebooks. Did you upload it as an ebook as well?
Yes, and that was probably a bigger learning curve for me because I think creating that format from, like, let's say Word is easier. I wasn't in design, and the way I had set up my pages, in the end, my ebook looks more like a PDF on the Kindle version, which is fine. But if I ever have more time, I will definitely tweak it a little bit better. Because when you open up a Kindle book, I think you can either enlarge the text or reduce the text,
Yeah.
but with a recipe book,
You
you
can't
don't
do that.
focus is yeah, it's not as the focus is not as much on the photography of the recipe, and you can put the photos. And the way I did it, I ended up linking. If a person clicks on the title of the little picture, it would bring them right to the page. So
Mhm.
it works. It was just all new to me. Like,
Yeah.
that was something I had never done yet.
Yeah. And they call
Yeah.
that fixed format, meaning that it fixes it because with cookbooks, there's so many different design elements going on. It's different than just a book of straight text. And it does present challenges. So a lot of times the ebooks are just published in fixed format. And I think it's probably even true for my first cookbook that was illustrated. It's still a fixed format ebook. I can't adjust the font size on my Kindle and read it with
Okay.
big font,
Okay.
small font.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that is the reality of any book that's highly graphic or set in columns or things like that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And the royalties you earn on an ebook are higher than on a print book because
Mhm.
obviously there's no printing costs for them. So
Right, and you can set a different price for your ebook if you want to.
yes, yeah,
Yes.
and at that I could make much lower for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Very nice. Well, what do you wish you knew before you, published your recipes in a book on Amazon?
Oh, that's a great question. um, what I wish I knew. Um, there's a lot of different things that are necessarily what I wish I knew, but that are probably helpful if you were to do this kind of project. Um, but it's more so after you start selling the book. But these are like, I guess, more tips
Mhm.
for anyone considering it. But so I'm trying to think of what I jotted some notes so I wouldn't forget. And now
Yeah.
there's little things like when you have people review your book, for example, if they buy a copy, when they make or leave a comment or feedback and a rating, if they bought a copy, it will verify their purchase. And that will also help your book get seen, uh, maybe more so than a person that just got a copy for free to review and then they go to Amazon and leave a comment. Um, and those again are helpful to just get your book noticed by more people.
Mhm.
I think in your program we had discussed like categories. When you upload your book, and let's say your book is about vegan baking, you can pick who you want. Um, you're like who's going to see those recipes if a person's searching gluten-free or
Right.
vegan or plant-based. So I for the longest time was like so focused on picking the best categories, but in the end Amazon just decides for you. It didn't really matter. So that was one thing I think that I wish I would have known before,
Because you
because
felt
when
like,
you
yeah,
pick,
yeah,
yeah, so I could have picked bread machine for small appliances and or gluten-free baking or gluten-free diets, and then let's say vegan baking. But then in the end they switched it to like the weirdest category. So that was not important in the end.
hmm,
I even requested to change them and it doesn't matter. It doesn't, like they'll just, so your electronic copy versus your print copy will be categorized differently, which was very interesting. And whether it's in the US or Canada, it'll be categorized differently too.
hmm.
Um,
I guess
so
I
it's like
didn't
all those,
realize that that was always the case. So that is good to know. And
yeah,
yeah, and I'll remember that when if anybody's getting hung up on the categories next time, that you need to try to categorize it best you can. And like you said, keep it simple, but it may not
exactly.
ultimately be where it lands.
Yeah, yeah.
I think they
So
were
those are
having some
the,
trouble with people self-publishing though, and they'd pick a really obscure topic and they would publish their book there, even if it wasn't related, so they could say they had a number one sale in a category in
mm-hmm,
Amazon.
mm-hmm.
Um, so I think perhaps, especially even with low content books, they've been clamping down on that a little bit. Yeah.
There's another thing that too I just thought about when uh, something I wish I knew before, like when we did our low content book. So Amazon can provide you with an ASIN number,
Right.
um, which is great for low content book. But with my book, I wasn't sure if I wanted their number,
Mhm.
because they can provide it for free. But in Canada, I found out afterwards because I was trying to buy one from the US. And then eventually I'm like, I found out in Canada, you can actually request an ISBN number for free. There's no cost.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah. So when I got the number, you can get one for your electronic version and one for your print version.
Mhm.
And so it's something to plan for, I guess. If you're in the US and you need to buy or purchase an ISBN number, try to do so beforehand, even like once you know the title of your book and
Yeah.
some
I
the
think
main
it's around
information. Yeah.
you can use Amazon's. It does limit you to selling that particular format of the book. It's proprietary only to Amazon, meaning you couldn't print it and go sell it on Barnes& and Noble's website. It's limits you to Amazon, but if you have your own, you have a little bit more, freedom. I think it's about $125 to buy an ISBN number, and, several of you did buy your own and some of you didn't, so it really ultimately depends, but that's something everybody can talk through individually and decide what they want to do, but that's neat to know
Hmm.
that Canada actually provides ISBNs. You do need a separate one for each format, so if you have an ebook and a print book, but it's the same content in the book, it doesn't matter. You have to have different ISBN for every
Yes.
format of the book, right? If you do an audio book of the bread machine book, you'll have to have a different ISBN number.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So
it's useful to know in case somebody wanted to take some of their books and maybe sell it at their local, bookstore or kitchen store or
Right.
something like that, having that ISBN number is helpful.
Yeah.
As I'm not
Definitely.
sure if they could sell it, if I guess they could get their own too, but I think it's easier if it's already there. So it's just a
Yeah.
great tip to know.
Yeah, I think it is easy if it's already there. And there are some other platforms that you could still upload your current PDF to. I think Ingram Spark to get distribution, like if people are searching for it in bookstores. Let's say there's a bookstore in Cincinnati and someone says, I'd really like to, not that they couldn't order it from Amazon, but um, or maybe a specialty flower company that wanted to carry it in a shop. They could order copies through Ingram if you upload your files to Ingram Spark, but they can't do that through Amazon necessarily. Um, so
You can't do it through Amazon, but there is a feature on Amazon KDP that you can select to widen your reach as far as selling. And it is a feature on Amazon. I
oh,
did not
good.
select
Well,
it.
that's probably
If
something
you,
that that's probably something that
yeah,
they're doing so that people will just stick with the Amazon platform, and that's good to know for more distribution.
I think if you select it, the earnings are even lower.
Yeah,
The royalties are lower. Yeah.
probably so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So if anybody's thinking about doing a book on Amazon or perhaps even joining cookbooks on KDP, what kind of advice do you have someone who's actually dreaming about this cookbook that they want to write and publish?
Honestly, just I I've been telling myself that for a long time, but just write the book you wish you had for yourself, because someone somewhere will want that exact book, and it will be helpful and inspiring to people who cook and bake like you. So it might be weird to somebody, but to other people it'll be exactly what they're looking for. So think back, like, you know, a few years ago, or like right now, like what would be the book that you wish you had, and create that book. And it might not be perfect at first, but you know what, that's fine, because that's how we learn uh, and get better as food writers and recipe creators. As we practice, we just get our experience, we get better, and it becomes easier, and then the next book will be even more perfect.
Right. And I think that
Mm.
this whole concept of trying to wait until we're not going to make a mistake in a book is near to impossible when it comes to cookbooks. Um, there isn't a perfect topic. There really isn't a perfect time. There isn't going to be a perfect interior, but you do learn so much by going through the process. And I agree with you 100% that if it's something that somebody's dreaming of doing and has been thinking about for a long time, I I mean, I've done cookbooks now, I guess both ways. I think it's I think going through the process is really educational. And now let me ask you this question, Chantal. If you were how do you feel set up now if you were to enter the traditional space, maybe with a whole nother topic or set of recipes related to your expertise? What are your thoughts about that now versus before you did KDP?
So before KDP, I felt a lot of resistance. I mean, you cover this topic sometimes too, but I was just, yeah, you want everything to be perfect, so you wait or you resist or you change your mind. And I think it's just so important to just do it. And if I had, of course, when I do it again, I plan to do it again, I think it'll be so much easier, like less stress to just put something together. I think, yeah, I think you just have to do it. You really
Yeah.
just have to do it.
And
Yeah.
it could be like somebody learning how to bake gluten-free, no egg or dairy
Yeah.
bread in their bread machine for the first time. But
They're
they
nervous.
equipped
Yeah.
right, but then equipped with your recipes and your tips in the book that you wrote, they get a pretty good result the first time, and then they think, "Well, I'll try another recipe, or I'll do that same recipe over," and so much of what we do when it comes to writing recipes, publishing books, is about just sticking with the practice of it, giving yourself some space to know there is no perfection, and taking action when you're inspired to take action and not overthinking it or waiting or hoping that that's going to change because it really never does. Even in the midst of a project or when you hit publish or when you get your books in the mail, that little feeling can still be lurking around. But um, I think that it's been great to watch you go through this trajectory of dreaming about this and then actually, creating the book through doing it yourself. And can't wait to see what you might do next. Maybe it'll be another self-published book. Maybe it won't, but I have a feeling this isn't the only book you're going to be writing.
I hope not. I have more ideas. That's not the problem. I always have tons of ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right about that. I think people generally probably, if anything else, have too many ideas. But you were very brave to narrow it down and say, okay, just for this book, I'm going to do Bread Machine. And once we can look through that lens of our project, then through a narrow focus, it really does help, I think, to streamline it.
For sure. And I overheard you say something, I think it was on a previous podcast, but you said something, if you have more time, then the KDP self-published route is like perfect. But if you have more money, then maybe getting help is easier for some people. But for myself, I had the time and I wanted to learn and I wanted to do it. So it was perfect for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah. And if someone, maybe there's someone like you that bakes the same way, but let's suppose that they have, instead of an online business, their business is offline, in person, a bakery where they're managing a team of bakers to bake this bread. You can see how their time use would feel different, but they
Yeah.
still want to get the book out there. So for them, they maybe have less time and they could pay a publisher to publish their book for them and then sell it to all the people that come into the shop. So I think everybody has to look at their own situation, their own evaluation of where they are. Do I have more time? Do I have more money? Do I have both? Do I have neither? And then choosing the path that works best for your particular situation. Because there's certainly no right or wrong. Cookbook publishing in the 21st century is a whole new animal. There's lots of excellent options in all three categories. And I think that I think it was really fun to work with you too, because you had this graphic design background. And so the technology part of that was really not a barrier for you. And you understood what it would take to create a cover and to create the interior. But even the people that were in the group that didn't, I think that if you don't have Chantal's expertise, they did a great job. And the books that they produced, with the way that we learned to format it, worked out really well.
Yes, there's a lot of tools nowadays online. Example, Canva,
Yes.
that can help with cover design. I think you can actually even do your cover design on Amazon. They have something, but it's very, I would say, basic. But definitely with Canva, you can do so much nowadays. So yeah, there's definitely easier tools to help you do page layouts and anything that you might need to do a cookbook for sure.
Yeah. I think Canva probably offers a little bit more of a broad base when it comes to design styles. I haven't designed a cover on Amazon. I might have to give that a try and see what it's like, but I learned on Canva, and that's what I currently teach, and I think it's fun for people to learn how to do that, and really neat to see it actually come to life. So,
Definitely.
why don't you tell everybody, Chantal, how they can connect with you online?
Online, you can find my blog, which is called freshisreal.com. And then on YouTube, it's the same thing, Fresh is Real. Instagram, I'm getting back into Pinterest a little bit more, and the same thing. You can find me under Fresh is Real. And I have a wonderful baking group on Facebook. So if you search gluten-free vegan baking by Fresh is Real, you'll find my wonderful group. And those are my preferred ways to, I guess, share my information. But when I do have new recipes, it's definitely on my blog. And I try as much as possible to share a video with each recipe because they are different and because they're allergen friendly. It's always very helpful for my community to see a video to get a better feel to what to expect. So that's pretty much how you can find me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I wish you nothing but the best with your book, and I look forward to interviewing you someday in the future about your next cookbook project. But until then, just keep enjoying what you're doing and helping all the people that you're helping learn how to bake bread. that's gluten-free, no egg or dairy.
Perfect. Thank you, Maggie, for having me.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green. And until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.